Hello, I'm David Chaston with 90 at 9, brought to you by interest.co.nz. This week, get everything you need to know in 90 seconds on 9 o'clock. With news, the US has fired the first actual shots in the coming trade wars. American tariffs on steel have come into effect today, and they will mainly hit countries that used to be allies of the US: Canada, the EU and Mexico. All three of them have now announced retaliatory tariffs proportionate to the American action. They also hit Australia and New Zealand. Consumer spending by Americans added momentum in April as their incomes continued to rise, a sign consumers could drive stronger economic growth in the second quarter. The PCE inflation measure, the Fed's preferred, rose at a 2% annual rate. And EU inflation was up to 1.9% in May, driven by higher oil prices. That was much higher than the 1.6% rise expected. And their jobless rate was unchanged at 8.5%, and that too was worse than expected. In Canada, lower than expected growth in the March quarter has analysts scratching their heads. Those new mortgage restrictions bit hard, restraining consumer spending. Lower export growth also weighed on their result. And back in the US, their housing market activity unexpectedly slowed in April. After 2 straight months of modest increases, pending home sales dipped to their third lowest level in the past year. And India's economic expansion accelerated to its fastest pace in nearly 2 years as the effects fade from the government's crackdown on untaxed cash trading and the adoption of a national unified GST. GDP was up 7.7% in the 3 months through March, compared with a year earlier, and that was better than analysts' expectations of a 7.4% gain. Global air passenger demand rose by 6.2% compared to April 2017, which was down from a 12-month high of 9.7% in March. International travel growth is now lagging domestic growth, with the internal Chinese and Indian markets growing at spectacular rates. International air travel only grew by 4.8% overall, although the Asia-Pacific region was up by almost double that at 8.5%. In Australia, online retail giant Amazon is moving to geo-block Australian consumers from its global sites. It is doing this rather than having to collect GST on transactions on those international sites. It is a move that will limit the range of goods available to Aussies on Amazon. US Treasury 10-year yield is little changed today at 2.83%, and that's down 1 basis point on the day. The Chinese 10-year is at 3.65%, up 3 basis points, while the New Zealand equivalent is at 2.76%, also up 1 basis point. Gold has eased slightly to be just a touch under $1,300 an ounce in overnight trading. Oil prices have slipped back, but only in the US market. They are down $1.50 a barrel to just over $67, but the Brent benchmark is still at just over $77.50 a barrel. And the Kiwi dollar will start today at 70 US cents, at its highest in a month. On the cross rates, we're also firm at 92.6 Aussie cents and now just on 60 euro cents. That puts the TWI up to 73, which is a 6-week high. I'm David Chaston. That was 90 at 9, brought to you by interest.co.nz.